India's holiday capital.
Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India, India's voice to the world. I am Tanvi Taneja. Coming up in the next hour. India hands over the G20 presidency to Brazil President Lula da Silva. He congratulates India for effective leadership. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds bilateral talks with French President Emmanuel Macron on the sidelines of the G20 summit. World leaders shower praise on India's G20 leadership, reaching the Delhi Declaration with a balance struck on Ukraine. The Morocco earthquake death toll crosses 2,000, with survivors sleeping out in the open in the cold. From India to Brazil, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has handed over to Lula da Silva as the next holder of the G20 presidency. The Brazilian leader has praised Prime Minister Modi's leadership during this year's G20 summit. President da Silva says the preparatory ministerial meetings will be hosted in several cities in all 5 regions of Brazil. All G20 member nations are expected to attend the Rio de Janeiro summit in November 2024.
मैं G20 समिट के समापन की घोषणा करता हूं। वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर का रोड मैप सुखद हो। स्वस्ति अस्तु विश्वस्य, यानी संपूर्ण विश्व में आशा और शांति का संचार हो। 140 करोड़ भारतीयों की इसी मंगल कामना के साथ आप सभी का बहुत-बहुत धन्यवाद।
While addressing the closing session of the G20 summit, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva congratulated Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi for efficiently leading the G20 bloc.
I'd like to congratulate Prime Minister Narendra Modi for the efficient leading of the Indian presidency of the G20 and for the excellent work done in preparing this summit, and also with all the care that he and they gave us in these days that we spent with you. I thank India for its efforts to give voice, for giving voice to the topics of interest to emerging economies. So I would also like to give my salute to our friend, the representative of the African Union, who is a member of G20.
After handing over the presidency, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said India has the responsibility of holding the G20 presidency till November of this year.
Your Highnesses, Excellencies, जैसा आप सब जानते हैं, भारत के पास नवंबर तक G20 प्रेसिडेंसी की भी जिम्मेदारी है। अभी 2.5 महीने बाकी हैं। इन 2 दिनों में आप सभी ने अनेक बातें यहाँ रखी हैं, सुझाव दिए हैं, बहुत सारे प्रस्ताव रखे हैं। हमारी ये जिम्मेदारी है कि जो सुझाव आए हैं उनको भी एक बार फिर देखा जाए कि उनकी प्रगति में गति कैसे लाई जा सकती है। मेरा प्रस्ताव है कि हम नवंबर के अंत में G20 का एक वर्चुअल सेशन और रखें। उस सेशन में हम इस समिट के दौरान तय विषयों की समीक्षा कर सकते हैं। इन सब की डिटेल्स हमारी टीम आप सभी के साथ शेयर करेगी। मैं उम्मीद करता हूं कि आप सब इससे जुड़ेंगे। योर हाइनेसेस, एक्सेलेंसीज, इसी के साथ मैं G20 समिट के समापन की घोषणा करता हूं। वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर का रोड मैप सुखद हो। स्वस्ति अस्तु विश्वस्य, यानी संपूर्ण विश्व में आशा और शांति का संचार हो। 140 करोड़ भारतीयों की इसी मंगल कामना के साथ आप सभी का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
And Chief Coordinator of India's G20 Presidency, Harshvardhan Shringla, elaborated on the New Delhi declaration adopted at the G20 summit. Shringla stressed that reaching consensus on the first day of the presidency is tremendously positive news.
We have certainly, I think, in many senses, ensured that the Prime Minister's vision of an ambitious, outcome-oriented, inclusive presidency would be held. I think has been seen in every aspect of the way that we've conducted our presidency right up to the end. And in many senses, I think, the fact that we have an outcome document that reflects consensus among all of our G20 partners, and those partners are from, as you know, from the developed world and from the emerging economies, I think is an extraordinary achievement, but also answers your question that yes, we have achieved that objective, but more important, we've achieved the objectives of the Global South. We've achieved the objectives of articulating the voice of the Global South in the G20 and addressing their core concerns. And we see the outcome documents, this is what it is. We have addressed the requirements and concerns of the Global South.
As the G20 summit concludes, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral talks with some of the visiting leaders. The Indian Premier held a very productive meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron over lunch. The two leaders discussed a series of topics, and they said that they looked forward to ensuring that India-France relations scaled new heights of progress. Both countries share close ties and strategic partnership. French President Emmanuel Macron thanked Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, saying that India did its utmost for the G20 presidency to serve unity and peace.
In this context of the G20, I would like to commend the African Union for joining G20 as a full-fledged member. As you know, France was amongst the first ones to support this candidacy, and in Bali we launched a call. At the time, Macky Sall was representing the African Union. When it comes to mobilizing international financing to tackle poverty and climate change, this G20 acknowledged a number of developments. First of all, we exceeded the $100 billion of reallocation of SDRs. It is in 2020, at the time, that we decided with the IMF to issue some new SDRs. Then, when we worked on financing the African economies, we agreed to reallocate $100 billion to Africa.
Our correspondent Amritpal Singh now joins us from the G20 summit venue, Bharat Mandapam. Amritpal, now the summit is really nearing to its end. How would you sum up the hits and misses of the New Delhi G20 summit?
The summit has already ended, as the Prime Minister announced in his closing remarks that he brought the summit to a close when he proposed, just after he proposed that the leaders meet once again virtually before India's presidency ends on the 30th of November. There are about two and a half months to go for that, and the Prime Minister would want to use the opportunity of India's presidency to see that whatever is agreed in the New Delhi Declaration is brought to fruition, or at least some progress is made. Then, of course, it is the responsibility of the next presidency to ensure that the journey from New Delhi to Rio de Janeiro is completed, and the consensus that was achieved in New Delhi is further built upon, and what could not be achieved here is achieved, at Rio de Janeiro. I would say the key takeaways, or as you say, the hits, was the joining of the African Union, the strengthening of the voice of the Global South through that, a broader participation, putting development at the core of the agenda of G20, not allowing geopolitics to hijack issues of economic importance, and adopting a human-centric approach towards solving the problems, getting everybody to agree on the need to accelerate the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, putting the focus and the spotlight clearly on women-led development and climate mitigation and climate finance, mitigation through adoption of life principles, finance through putting an ambitious $1 trillion target of financing that, putting together biofuels pact or alliance between them. So I think there are, on multiple counts, India has been able to get 100% consensus. This is perhaps one of the few rare documents in the history of the G20 outcome documents that has no footnotes. It has no chair's summary, which basically means that there is 100% consensus. Everybody in that room agreed upon what was formulated there, even with the vexed issues like the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict or war, and coming to a consensus that is reflected in the text of the document. I wouldn't say misses much, but yes, there always remains room for improvement. They've set ambitious targets. The real test of what they agreed upon is, will they live up to the commitments that they made at New Delhi? And that future will tell us.
Yes, indeed. Amritpal, thank you for summarizing the hits and misses for us. We'll come back to you in the bulletin. You're watching DD India News Hour, still to come. G20 leaders pay homage to Mahatma Gandhi at Rajghat in New Delhi. President of Indonesia and Brazil hand over a sapling to Indian Prime Minister Modi at the third session of the G20 summit called One Future. And in a homecoming of sorts, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and his wife Akshata Murthy offer prayers at Akshardham Temple in Delhi.
Welcome to Delhi. Narrator of umpteen tales. Creator of historic folklore. To the Delhi of today that is proud of its past. To the Delhi of tomorrow that's charting a glorious future. To lanes, to foods, to ever-changing city moods. To walls, to historic gates, and everything in between. To art, to theatre, and an ode to the inner creator.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I am Tanvi Taneja. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a very fruitful meeting with Comoros President Azali Assoumani a short while back. He once again extended congratulations to the African Union for joining the G20 family. Comoros is vital for India's Sagar vision. The deliberations included ways to enhance cooperation in areas such as that of shipping, trade, and more. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also met his Canadian counterpart, Justin Trudeau, on the sidelines of the G20 summit. They discussed the full range of India-Canada ties across different sectors. And in this series, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Turkey President Recep Tayyip Erdogan also met On the sidelines of the summit, the two leaders talked about ways to further cement trade and infrastructure linkages between both the countries. Indian Prime Minister also met German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on the sidelines of the G20 summit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also met South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol. Both sides discussed ways on strengthening ties and cooperation in several fields. And our correspondent Meghna Dev now joins us from the G20 summit venue at Bharat Mandapam. Meghna, despite some skepticism, the G20 summit reached a consensus and finally the Delhi Declaration was adopted. So Meghna, if you could summarize for our viewers the key points of this Delhi Declaration. Meghna Dev and Amritpal Singh.
Yes, Tanvi, when we actually say that this was a very important...
Go on, Meghna.
Yes, Tanvi, actually, I couldn't hear you properly. But yes, definitely, as you're talking about the major takeaways from the declaration, there are the first important thing that India achieved during its presidency, if we actually see, is bringing contemporary subjects on the table through important engagement groups. So second, when we talk about, obviously, the African Union joining the table. Third, we talk about when Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that the voice of the Global South is essential. When we're talking actually about bringing the voice of developing nations to the table, this was very essential. The inclusion of African Union to the G20, giving it a permanent seat, was very essential. And definitely, Tanvi, we have a look at how quickly this happened. In December, India got the presidency. In January, India hosted the Voice of Global South Summit on 12th and 13th of January. 125 nations joined it. So definitely the first ever Voice of Global South Summit in itself received a huge response. So that definitely gives a signal, or that definitely means that there was a requirement, or there was, this was essential. And the Global South was actually wanting to be, heard. So that is very essential, and that's what India has managed to do. And in June, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi sent, a letter to all the G20 nations saying that African Union should get a permanent seat at the table. Definitely, it was brought up at the Sherpa meeting in July, and now here we have it. We saw, yesterday the African Union chairperson sitting on the high table. So that definitely means that India is walking the talk. And when yesterday External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar said that the Senegal president had told Prime Minister Narendra Modi and told to include the African Union in the in the G20, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi said this is Modi's guarantee that this will happen, and exactly that's what has happened. Also, sources clearly tell us, that this declaration that has been achieved is a declaration which has been received by consensus. Now, there are different types of consensus. This consensus is a convergent consensus. That's what the sources tell us, not a divisive consensus. So definitely that clearly means that on the pointers over 80 paragraph declaration, there is a consensus by the member countries, by the member organizations on what has been jotted down. Especially when we are talking about environment, it becomes extremely essential that India has put forward the agenda of thinking about the planet, thinking about climate action and climate finance in a big way. And one of the best takeaways from that section is the GBA.
All right, our correspondent Meghna Dev reporting on the takeaways of the Delhi Declaration. So India has handed over the G20 presidency to Brazil, and with this, the 18th G20 summit has come to an end, but India still holds the presidency till November of this year. Earlier this morning, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that he expects the world leaders to have a virtual meeting again in November, when officially the presidency is handed over to Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. So earlier this morning, G20 leaders and international delegates visited a memorial site for India's father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. The group, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, paid tributes to the father of the nation at his resting place, where an eternal flame burns for Mahatma Gandhi at Rajghat. The world leaders laid wreaths to honor the memory of Mahatma Gandhi. A black marble platform marks the spot of Gandhi's last rites, an apostle of peace and non-violence, Mahatma Gandhi. And there we see the world leaders standing in tribute to Mahatma Gandhi. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also greeted the G20 leaders individually at the site. As each leader arrived, they were felicitated with a shawl from the Indian leader. There were also performances of devotional songs recited there. These are prayers that were very dear to father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi. At the summit, the President of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, and the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, gave Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi a tree sapling for the planting ceremony. This was to symbolize the third G20 session. It was called One Future. The UK Prime Minister of Indian origin, Rishi Sunak, visited the Akshardham temple in the Indian capital, New Delhi. Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, along with his wife Akshata Murthy, offered prayers at the site. This is Rishi Sunak's first official visit to India as UK's Prime Minister. He met with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Saturday on the sidelines of the ongoing G20 summit. A wonderful architectural piece Akshardham temple is. It is one of the tourist sites in New Delhi, and the weather in New Delhi is also sort of auspicious in the morning. It rained slightly this morning. US Ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, spoke exclusively to DD India. The US envoy talked about the strengthened relations between the two countries. He added that multilateralism is evolving and the US considers India to be a great ally.
We have with us US Ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti. Thank you for speaking to us. The relationship between India and the United States has never been better than before. Quite a lot of meetings in the last 1 year, more bilaterals than we've actually seen. Prime Minister Modi was in America. We've seen a lot of series of meetings happening between the two. How do you think the relationship is moving forward? This rapprochement, how would you look at it?
I think every time I think it's reached the highest point it can reach, it goes even higher. This is a relationship based on two leaders who genuinely love being with each other, but also two governments that increasingly love working together, from climate to women's empowerment, from security and military to issues of financial reforms. We proved by coming here not only the warmth towards India, but we saw India's leadership. And I think this relationship is about each of us following each other, building on each other's strengths, and not just bringing that to our countries, but to the world.
Right, and the American media talks about India being the bulwark against China. Of course, there's an elaborate discussion and analysis waiting on that. But how do you view that, given the kind of developments we've seen? We've had the ICET earlier last year. We also had the Quad meeting. We had the I2U2. How are we moving forward in all these initiatives, especially with the heightened activity in the Indo-Pacific? Has the interest increased a lot over the years, according to you?
No question. We love the Indo-Pacific as a region. I'm from Los Angeles, so I'm on the eastern edge of the Indo-Pacific, and here we are close to the western edge of it. But we're united by values, values that the seas should be free for all people, that countries should play by the rules, they should respect borders and sovereignty, and that we should build an economy that works for everyone. India inspires me when I see how the economy is bringing those up from the bottom, and we certainly have a president of the United States who wants to bring the bottom up and the middle out. When we have a strong middle class in both countries, it shows that prosperity isn't just for the few. And with other countries, we might have points of interest. We both want peaceful relations with China, where we all play by the same rules. But our relationship doesn't depend on any third country. It's between India and the United States. It's real, it's warm, it's genuine, and it's growing.
Okay, but both countries do see multilateralism in crisis. Would you agree?
I think multilateralism is actually evolving, and I think we see it in a good way. In the United States, we engage in multilateralism. Sometimes others say, oh, West versus the rest. This was proof at G20. The United States looks at the entire world and cares about the entire world, whether it's advocating for India's independence, decades ago, or now looking at the ways that we can diversify our supply chains, work together on health solutions, climate solutions. This is based in friendship and real, genuine goodwill. But I think it's also incredibly strategic because we know it's not just America plus India, it's America times India when we get together.
Thank you, Ambassador, for speaking to us and taking our time. That was a U.S. Ambassador to India telling us about the relationship between the two countries and how it has evolved over the years. And we're going to see more initiatives between the two in the coming future. This is Jessica Taneja for DD India.
You're with us on DD India Live, still to come in the bulletin. Morocco mourns quake victims as death toll passes 2,000. In a surprise move, Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi meets Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev. And Hurricane Lee was downgraded to Category 3 storm but still remains powerful as it nears the Caribbean. You're with us on DD India Live. I'm Tanvi Taneja. A quick look at the top stories we're tracking at this hour. India hands over the G20 presidency to Brazil. President Lula da Silva congratulates India for effective leadership. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds bilateral talks with French President Emmanuel Macron on the sidelines of the G20 summit. The world showers praise on India's G20 leadership, having reached the Delhi Declaration with a balance struck on Ukraine. So addressing media in New Delhi on Sunday, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida termed the G20 leaders' declaration, the New Delhi Declaration, as a truly meaningful achievement.
Under the leadership of India as this year's chair, we were able to agree on the G20 Leaders' Declaration, which is a truly meaningful achievement. Japan has been engaged in the negotiations with the intent to pass on the outcome of the G7 to the G20. And we were able to hand over to the G20 points that were confirmed at the Hiroshima summit, such as achievement of net zero through diverse pathways according to the situation of each country, establishment of sustainable and resilient agricultural and food systems, and strengthening the delivery of medical countermeasures, MCM. I look forward to working with other leaders to follow up on the outcomes delivered by the G7 and the G20.
Speaking to media in New Delhi, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan described India as its greatest trade partner in South Asia.
Within the context of my visit, I've had the privilege to get together with the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, on a bilateral basis. India is our greatest trade partner in South Asia, and we have great potential to enjoy primarily in the field of economy and many others. And I'm so happy to say that we will be able to enjoy a full opportunity to exercise this potential.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau termed India as an extraordinarily important economy in the world and an important partner to Canada.
We recognize that India is an extraordinarily important economy in the world and an important partner to Canada on everything from fighting climate change to creating growth and prosperity for citizens. There's always a lot of work to do, and we will continue to do it.
And to discuss the key takeaways of this 18th G20 summit, we are now joined by Ambassador S.R. Thayal, former senior diplomat. Welcome, sir, to the show. One of the huge achievements of this G20 summit was the admission of the 55-member African Union as its 21st member, and this was done at India's request. What, according to you, is the symbolic and substantive significance of African Union's admission into the bloc?
From the very beginning, under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, this was one of the objectives of G20 to make it more inclusive. And also, India had positioned itself and worked that it become the spokesperson of the Global South. That G20 decisions are not only for economic growth, development, peace and prosperity of the 20 members, but also of the rest of the world. And if we see the way the entire exercise was done with the Global South Summit in January and series of meetings, and then Prime Minister wrote to all the other members of G20 proposing that African Union should be made a full member, a permanent member, and they all responded. I think this is one of the biggest achievements of this G20 summit under the India's presidency, that it has become more inclusive, and a big group of 54 countries is now represented in addition to European Union. Of course, there have been many, many other achievements, but this is a permanent achievement which will remain forever.
How far, Ambassador Thayal, would you say that India has succeeded in bridging the divide between the Global South countries and the Global North through this summit?
I recall External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar saying in one of the public platforms that India is a credible bridge, both between North and South, that means the economic divide, and also between East and West, which is the strategic divide, which we see the new Cold War seems to be coming in. Because India is in a very unique position. It's a very large country, and from our independence, we have not aligned with any bloc. First it was called non-alignment, now it is called multi-alignment, but we have not aligned with any bloc. And we have friendship and goodwill for everybody, for all the countries. Our Prime Minister can speak to President Vladimir Putin, he can speak to President Biden, he can speak to President Zelensky, and all the rest. There is a certain prestige of India with the 5th largest economy in the world, soon in 5-6 years going to become the 3rd largest economy. We just landed the Chandrayaan on the South Pole of the moon, and our Indian diaspora working all over. So in many ways, India's prestige is high, India's status is high, and India comes across as a friend and partner for all the countries of the world. And we are willing to work with them, we are willing to speak for them, advocate their genuine causes. So there is a certain credibility. And this adoption of the declaration, New Delhi Declaration by consensus, shows that other countries respect that credibility, they honor that credibility, because in my view, both the West and Russia have conceded some ground and have respected India and India's paragraph, which was proposed at the last minute, so that there is a consensus document that shows India's ability to play as a bridge between East and West. So admission of European Union shows India's ability to play as a bridge between North and South, the economic divide. And this consensus document, including paragraphs on Ukraine, shows India's ability, capacity, and aptitude and position to play as a bridge in this strategic divide between East and the West.
Ambassador Tayal, on the sidelines of the G20 summit, a global biofuel alliance was launched aimed at promoting sustainability through the use of clean energy. Your assessment of this endeavor?
Energy is going to be a big issue going forward because all the developing countries want energy for their development. And fossil fuels, not only they are not inexhaustible, they are limited in quantity, but also they lead to climate change. So India is coming up with different solutions. We recall that International Solar Alliance was promoted by India with now it has about 124 members. And there is a tremendous movement for the renewable sources of energy. And by it is said to 2030, the total capacity may be tripled from today for renewable. And biofuels is another concept which has been there for decades. And for instance, mixing of ethanol in fossil fuels for running the cars, etc. And now the target has been set that globally it should be 20% mixing of ethanol which comes from bioenergy, from bagasse or some other vegetative products. So this is a very good target, and ultimately the objective is to gradually shift from fossil fuels to newer sources of energy. And it was very clearly said that the future sources will be green hydrogen or some new breakthrough which may come in nuclear energy. So biofuel, solar energy, they are like bridging energy sources, transitional energy sources, so the dependence on fossil fuels, coal, etc. gradually declines till the mankind attains technology as well as commercialization of green hydrogen and other technologies where the science is known, physics is known, chemistry is known, but technology is yet to develop.
At the summit, it was decided to launch an India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. And this has been hailed as a historic initiative on connectivity and infrastructure. Do you think this initiative will chart a bold course in the world order?
It is again a leap into the future, and it can be huge. Because India, unfortunately, if we look at the connectivity, on eastern side, we are Myanmar. There is a lot of difficulty. We all know about it. And this trilateral highway has not happened with Thailand because of problems in Myanmar. And if we look at the West, then Pakistan has just stopped our access to Central Asia and towards Europe through Central Asia. We have tried to go through Iran with Chabahar port and international north-south transport corridor. But because of these continuing sanctions against Iran, that has also not become commercially viable. Now, India and Gulf countries have a huge relationship. We have millions of our Indians working there. They are UAE, Saudi Arabia, they are our very big trading partners. So this new corridor which has been conceived is a huge alternative as from Bombay or from our western coast to United Arab Emirates, and then by train up to Haifa, or from Haifa to Italy by ship. And this will reduce the time taken from goods to go from India to Europe from 20 days to about 8 days. And there's a huge investment will come. Saudi Arabia has already put $20 billion on the table. The United States has a huge fund for infrastructure development, and surely some funds will be coming from there. India will bring its manpower, and Europe will bring its technology if this high-speed rail corridor is to be built. So it is a perfect partnership with India's engineering and manpower. Gulf countries have money and resources, and Europe has the technology and the markets. And there is a big future, but yes, it will take time because 1,000 kilometers of railways are to be constructed.
Okay, Ambassador Dayal, before we let you go, what would you say will be known as the single most important achievement of the Delhi Declaration at this summit? Very quickly, sir.
I will say that it is achievement for India. India has been recognized as one of the leading powers of India. Today, India has emerged as one of the leading powers. See, Delhi Declaration, these declarations come annually. And, after the next declaration, this will be forgotten. But where India has emerged today, how India has been recognized by our not only G20 partners, but 125 other countries which participated in the Global South Summit. India's moment has come, and this will be remembered, this will be taken back. So many thousands of delegates from other countries came and were taken to 50 other cities in India, 200 meetings, and they take away what a great country India is and combined with Chandrayaan and so I think all things together, and G20's biggest takeaway for future would be that India is a leading country in the world.
On that note, we wind up this discussion. Thank you very much, Ambassador Esat Dayal, for your analysis on the takeaways of the G20 summit. You're with us on DD India Live. Coming up, Novak Djokovic to take on Daniil Medvedev in the US Open men's singles final at the Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York tonight. In women's singles, US teen sensation Coco Gauff beat Arna Sabalenka to win her maiden Grand Slam title. In cricket, arch rivals India and Pakistan face off in an Asia Cup match in Colombo. Rain currently has halted play.
Welcome to Jaipur.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Let's turn focus to Maldives now. The country is now headed for a runoff vote after opposition candidate Mohammad Muizzu fell short of a majority in the first round of presidential elections. Muizzu took a surprise lead in the Saturday polls with 46% of votes, while President Ibrahim Mohamed Solih polled around 40%. A runoff election between the two will be held on the 30th of this month. The Moroccan government has declared 3 days of national mourning after a massive earthquake rocked the North African country. The death toll has surpassed 2,000, while 1,500 are reported to be injured. DD India's Alex Cadier reports from Marrakesh.
Yeah, well, there's certainly two different pictures in Marrakesh and an hour south of here. This city here, you can see there is some damage. That mosque had a 3-meter tower on top of it, which collapsed because of the earthquake and collapsed onto the pickup truck behind me as well. Now, that is the kind of limited damage you see around Marrakesh. People are, however, sleeping in the streets. They are worried about their houses, and they are worried that any aftershocks might cause damage to their homes, and that is really the main concern for people here in Marrakesh, not so much the damage itself. If you travel an hour south of here, however, that is much more serious indeed. In those remote Atlas Mountains, those very hard to reach villages, they're hard to reach in normal times, even harder now, and clearing the roads, clearing the rubble is the main focus for those authorities racing to try and clear the rubble and save any survivors from the earthquake now over a day after the tremors started. So that is the main concern. It is difficult to get a clear picture of exactly how that progress is going on. We know that Morocco has started asking for international help from some of its partners, but it's very much a situation here in Marrakesh where some locals have actually come up to us and said, please tell your viewers in India that Marrakesh is still going. There is some damage, but we are still going. The market around me is going, and that's also the reputational concern is one that people here in Marrakesh feel very strongly. So a difficult picture in the mountains, but Marrakesh trying to rebuild, trying to clean up and go back to normal as quickly as possible.
Hundreds of families in Marrakesh, in western Morocco, are spending sleepless nights outdoors after the devastating quake turned their lives upside down.
My kids were afraid. I could not leave them to go to work, so I stayed with them. I remained by their side, but when it comes to food, the shops close their doors. Here we are, enduring hunger and thirst.
Friday's earthquake is Morocco's deadliest in at least 6 decades. The epicenter was 72 kilometers southwest of Marrakesh. The major tremor turned many buildings into rubble, including a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the heart of the old city. Rescue workers are racing against time to find the survivors while the death toll is rising. Countries across the world, including India, the US, Germany, and France, have offered assistance. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the disaster from the G20 summit in New Delhi.
औपचारिक कार्रवाई शुरू से पहले हम सभी की ओर से कुछ देर पहले मोरक्को में आए भूकंप से प्रभावित लोगों के प्रति मैं अपनी हार्दिक संवेदना प्रकट करना चाहता हूं। हम प्रार्थना करते हैं कि सभी इंजर्ड लोग शीघ्र स्वस्थ हो। इस कठिन समय में पूरा विश्व समुदाय मोरक्को के साथ है और हम उन्हें हर संभव सहायता पहुंचाने के लिए तैयार हैं।
France has mobilized teams to help the quake victims.
The whole of the G20 has expressed its solidarity. We have mobilized the World Bank, the IMF, the European Union and the African Union so as to, with France, show strong support to the people of Morocco to rebuild and provide financial aid in this context.
Pope Francis has offered prayers for the victims of Morocco. He also thanked the rescue workers for their efforts in helping the victims. Thousands of people need help. The quake has left them in a desperate situation, one that will take many years to recover from. Abhishek Bose for DT India.
On to West Asia now. Days after imposing a ban on exports from the Gaza Strip, Israel has now decided to allow the export of commercial goods from this region. The initial ban was justified by Israel, citing concerns over attempts to smuggle explosives along with commercial goods. However, this move had significant repercussions affecting thousands of families and their livelihoods in the blockaded enclave. Let's now take a look at other stories making news around the world. US President Joe Biden has arrived in Vietnam on a historic trip aimed at strengthening relations with the Southeast Asian manufacturing powerhouse. President Biden will be received at Vietnam's presidential palace for a formal welcome by the Communist Party General Secretary. Both leaders are expected to head to the party headquarters for a crucial meeting before addressing the public. Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi made a surprise visit to Ukraine on Saturday. He met Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and top officials. They both agreed to begin discussions on security guarantees and cooperate on reconstructing Ukraine. Hayashi pledged support from both the public and private sectors in Japan. Senegal's President Macky Sall has nominated Prime Minister Amadou Bawas as the ruling coalition's candidate for the February 2024 presidential election. Ba, the former economy minister and foreign minister, is a tax specialist. He was appointed prime minister of the country in September last year. After violent unrest in the West African country, President Sall is not running for a third term. Hurricane Lee weakened on Saturday to a Category 3 storm and is expected to move north of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. However, it is expected to strengthen again. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says it could cause dangerous conditions on the U.S. East Coast from Sunday. Hurricane Lee is packing winds of 185 kilometers per hour. You're watching DD India Live. On to some sporting action now. First, from the fields of cricket, the Asia Cup encounter match between arch rivals India and Pakistan is underway currently at the R. Premadasa Stadium in Colombo. India had a fabulous start to their innings after Pakistan captain Babar Azam won the toss and invited India to bat. Shubman Gill scored 58 runs while Rohit Sharma made 56. KL Rahul and Virat Kohli are on the crease batting for India. When reports last came in, India were on 147 runs for the loss of 2 wickets when rain interrupted the proceedings. Well, one hopes that rain doesn't play spoil sport again between India and Pakistan encounter here at Asia Cup. Now, moving on to tennis, US teenager Coco Gauff mounted a fierce comeback to beat the Belarusian second seed Arna Sabalenka 2-6, 6-3, 6-2 in the US Open women's singles final and claimed her first Grand Slam title in front of adoring home fans. With the win, 6th seed Gauff became the first American to win a US Open singles title since Sloane Stephens in 2017. 19-year-old Gauff fed off noisy local support as she mounted a terrific second set fight back and kept the momentum going until the end of the battle before falling to the court on Arthur Ashe Stadium as she clinched the title with a backhand winner. Sabalenka had a superb start but could not keep the momentum going as unforced errors piled up and she closed her 2023 Grand Slam run, which included an Australian Open title and semi-finals at the Roland Garros and Wimbledon, on a disappointing note. On to men's singles, world number 2, Novak Djokovic will take on world number 3, Daniil Medvedev, in the US Open 2023 tennis final at the Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York. Today, the 36-year-old Djokovic is looking to equal Margaret Court's record of 24 Grand Slam tennis titles, the most by any player in history. Novak Djokovic has won 2 Grand Slams this year, the Australian Open and the French Open. He also made it to the finals at Wimbledon, where the Serbian lost to Carlos Alcaraz. In the semi-final, Djokovic defeated local favourite Ben Shelton 6-3, 6-2, 7-6 to reach his 10th final at Flushing Meadows. In the other semi-final, Russian third seed and US Open 2021 winner Daniil Medvedev beat top seed and reigning champion Carlos Alcaraz. The US Open 2023 final will be the 15th meeting between these two tennis stars. It will be a rematch of the 2021 US Open final, where Daniil Medvedev denied Djokovic a calendar year Grand Slam by beating the Serb in straight sets. An all-element rehearsal of the 19th Asian Games opening ceremony was held in the leading host city of Hangzhou in China on Saturday to systematically test the entire procedures, including rituals and performances to be presented at the ceremony. The opening ceremony of the Games will be held in Hangzhou Olympic Sports Center Stadium on September the 23rd. Nearly 50,000 people joined this rehearsal, and the whole ceremony was played out in 115 minutes. Saturday's rehearsal was the third opening ceremony rehearsal. The rehearsal shows that all sections involved in the ceremony were well connected and all departments worked in harmony to present an artistic feast to the audience. As the opening ceremony falls on autumn equinox, one of the 24 solar turns of the Chinese lunar calendar, the event will feature the beauty of traditional Chinese culture. So that's all we have for you in this edition of DD India Live. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, Instagram at DD India Live. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching.